My name is Philip Fielding. I work in the City of London as a fund manager. I'm married with 2 children. My wife Hannah, we got married 8 years ago. I love skiing, I love playing tennis, I love just being outdoors, going for walks and swimming as well. So I had a very, very sporty lifestyle and yeah, life was fine, life was good. I had a normal day at work, we had some meetings, but then I was beginning to feel unwell and at the end of the day I was thinking I might be coming down with some pretty nasty flu. On Easter Sunday morning at 6 o'clock, I felt so awful that I decided I needed to go and see someone about this. I cannot carry on like this anymore. I rang a taxi and I got the taxi driver to take me to the out-of-hours GP clinic. The GP saw me and said, I really don't like the look of you. You're straight in resus.
I got to the hospital about 2 o'clock and by the time I arrived, his clothes had all been removed. He was stretched out with a number of lines into him. His body was covered in a purple and grey rash. It was just apparent that he was pretty sick, but I hadn't realised. In a few hours he'd be in a coma. A nurse came to get me and said, do I want to go and see Philip now? I didn't really know what to expect, having been a few hours, and he was in a small room in isolation. I was asked to gown up straight away and go in and speak to Philip, who was lying, looking quite happy actually. He was certainly more comfortable because he'd got the oxygen on and he was propped up in bed.
To this day, not entirely sure if I even realised how ill I was.
I was getting quite teary and my nose was running and the snot was coming out under my mask. And then Philip said, "You're really embarrassing. Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because I think this is serious."
It became evident once he was here in intensive care that this was going to be more serious.
He was in multi-organ failure. He was requiring lots and lots of drugs to keep his blood pressure up, antibiotics. He was on a ventilator.
His acid level was huge. To the extent we wanted to get him on the kidney machine, the dialysis, to try and help and clear that.
He had a spectacular rash, which also diverted away a little bit from the potential diagnosis of streptococcal septicemia.
It was frightening, but I knew from meeting them, I trusted them, and I knew that he was in good hands.
Over the course of the night, he got worse, and then this rash appeared over his body, which just got darker and darker and ascended up his legs, up his trunk. I was really concerned throughout the whole night, and I recall it as one of my sort of most stressful nights at work because I was so worried that actually he wasn't going to pull through.
Then by the time I saw him on Tuesday, he was no longer Philip. He'd gone purple and green.
Hannah was here and I was supporting her through that, and I built up such a connection with her because we were having to be so truthful to her and honest about what was going on and how poorly he was and how that he might not make it.
I told the children that Daddy's sleeping and that he's very, very poorly, and that when we're very poorly we like to go to sleep, which they know. And yeah, that Daddy's in a very, very big sleep. And then the eldest said, "But he will wake up, won't he?"
His illness became so life-threatening that we had the family in at several moments trying to prepare them for the worst news.
Lots of conversations with Hannah, his wife, and later with his all the rest of his family who'd come over from Austria. Those conversations were very, very difficult.
It escalated to the point where we referred to the Papworth ECMO team, who came to assess whether they could support him, and he was so unstable and ill at that point that they said he had a 90% chance of not surviving.
We went with the ECMO consultant and sat down and had a chat to Hannah and the rest of the family, and at that point I was pretty convinced that I thought he was going to die.
And then they said, "I need to go and talk to him because short of a few things they might try, I don't think anything will be successful, and that we now have to accept that we're near the end of of life, and will I go and talk to him? So I did, and I told him that I could see he was in a lot of pain, and I could see that his body was wasted, and that I would understand. And I gave him permission that if he needed to go, not to hang on, because I could see how bad it was, and I didn't want him to suffer anymore. But there was a caveat, and I said, if you think you've got anything left to give, to fight for, or that you can do it, then please keep fighting, because if you think you can do it, and only you know if you can, then do it.
We felt that we should do everything that we could, so we said, well, we'll keep going tonight and see what happens. Between us, we made a few suggestions of some simple things that we could do, one of which was putting a chest drain in.
We were all a little bit cautious about this because firstly his skin was like a scalded skin over the area where this chest drain had to go in, and I seem to remember his blood clotting wasn't that good, so there were a few risk factors involved, but there was also little to lose.
But she thought he would hemorrhage as they performed a chest drain because he had no platelets and he was likely just to bleed, and that would bleed to death. But as there was nothing to lose, they decided to try it. And litres of black infected material poured out of his lungs.
And from that point onwards, he just started to rally and get better.
I came in the next day expecting to find that he had passed away overnight. And was delighted to discover that he hadn't, and in fact was a little bit better.
I was met again by John Bramall. He started to cry, and I said, has he gone? I presumed. And he said, no, I'm crying because I don't want to give you false hope, but he has made the night and he is improving. He was in a coma for about 2 weeks, but by day 10 he was sort of coming in and out of consciousness. So they don't just wake them up, they gradually come up. So if I shouted Philip, he'd turn his head and look at me. John Bramall said it's very likely that Philip will at least lose some toes, if not more, a number of fingers, and there's a chance he could be brain damaged. And we won't know until he's woken up. And that in some ways is more frightening than losing him.
When I was brought round from the coma, I was still not 100% understanding what was happening to me. This only came later. Seeing the children was actually quite a difficult thing, for me emotionally in particular. I was later told that my son Oscar said that unless he was told that this was actually his daddy, he wouldn't have recognized me, and that was incredibly difficult to actually come to terms with.
Toby can't remember his father ever having legs, even though he was 3, and Oscar was just fascinated by the stumps. He still is. He doesn't even realise he's doing it. Philip wheels in without his prosthetics on, he'll rub, just stroke his legs, twiddle with them. It just doesn't seem to bother him.
Philip was a perfect candidate of someone that was completely determined to do better and to get better very quickly. I think that sometimes that you can put in as much care and as much medical treatment as you can give, but if that person doesn't do anything for themselves to get better, it makes it a lot harder.
Having that sort of motivated patient who wants to help themselves is actually crucial. I mean, everything happens quicker because of it. Their recovery happens quicker, they push themselves more, therefore the physiotherapists are able to do more with them.
Philip was going to work as hard as he could, take on board anything that you threw at him to try. He was always game, he'd never say no. I mean, if he said no to a therapy session, it's because he really really couldn't at that particular time. When you can go home knowing that you've made a difference, that you may have done one thing to change someone's outcome of their hospital stay, or even just to relieve their pain. I think you go home feeling so satisfied that it doesn't really matter about money, and it makes you want to come in the next day and do it all again.
I have to stop myself sometimes and think, what a privileged position we are to be able to support people at the most difficult times of their life.
They're so professional and so good at their job, but yet they still manage to be human.
There's a real variety and a real range of professionals that have have helped me through this, and I'm in absolute awe of the staff at the Lister.
I didn't know that they have tea and cake every afternoon on a ward at a certain time, and that as much as possible they create a routine and a home.
I feel quite privileged that you know, the Lister Hospital was there to look after me when they needed to be there, and the fact that I came out with the opportunity to live an active and a fulfilled life is to a large extent down to the staff and the expertise at the Lister Hospital. I personally don't think I would have survived in many other setups and environments. I think that the people that looked after me, particularly in those early days in critical care, I basically owe them my life.
You can't thank them enough. It isn't possible. There's no word or present or the thanks. Someone for giving someone their life back, but not even that, just and keep supporting them to get them for all the things we want for our family to help support us achieve that.